Every generation is defined by a technology that changes the course of history. Today, AI is one of them.
And when I started to see what AI could do, I started to envision a future where a patient will have access to the right information. A patient will have a much stronger voice in their decision making. I think then you start to think about us moving from a sick care system to really a more of a caring, monitoring, tracking system.
How do you use AI to do a task better? And that's super important, and I think the people who solve that will actually excel.
I think the next 3 years will define the incredible opportunity that AI has to unleash.
Sunil, it is such a pleasure to have you on Early Science. Welcome.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you, Prashant. Just absolutely wonderful to be part of this discussion.
I want to start with your journey on how you got here, right? So you have been a professor, you have obviously have been a clinician, and now you work at a life sciences company. So maybe talk through how you chose medicine, how you chose oncology, and then what made you choose the career in life sciences.
So I'm a global citizen. I was born in Africa, grew up in India, did my schooling in Canada, and now I live in the U.S. So in many ways, that upbringing, that childhood, helped start to shape me as somebody who was really interested in helping people. And I knew that I wanted to be part of somebody's life by helping them in their time of the greatest need, which is sickness. And I was always scientifically curious, but also had this ability to emote and connect with people and had that empathy. And that really sort of came together to make sure that I pursue a career in medicine. And when I was in medical school, I had a chance to do different rotations. And when you do different rotations, you go for a couple of weeks. And what struck me when I did a rotation in oncology was that it was not a transactional rotation, where it was not that somebody gets sick and you treat them and then they go away and they go back to their life. You are actually part of their life for months and even years. And I saw that in the setting when I was with oncologists and how they were connecting with patients. You're part of their life and you're part of that journey. And the journey can be very, very long. And that ability to be part of somebody's life for that period of time during a period that they really need you was really sort of a aha moment for me, that I wanted to be part of that patient journey, and I wanted to be a part of oncology. So I decided to pursue oncology as a career, and very soon thereafter, I became really interested in research, administration, leadership, and that helped to shape the next phase of my career.
That's so interesting. And the transition from being a professor to joining the corporate world. I mean, what sort of made you do that? What are some of the?
Yeah. So when I was doing my medical, what we call residency and specialization, I did a master's in education at that time, and the master's was focused on leadership and how do you become a leader. And I really became interested in how you become not only an effective leader yourself, but also how do you lead others to bring about change. So when I was, as a clinician, helping patients, serving patients, I really became interested in teaching, interested in leading, and interested in bringing new therapies. So that led me to the work that we did in breast cancer research, and that really helped me expose to sort of the research community outside of Canada. And then I also had the incredible privilege to lead a cancer center and build a cancer center. And that started to give me a vantage point of what cancer care delivery will look like, not only for patients today, but what it needs to look like for decades to come when we're designing the center. And while I was doing that, there was also two things that happened. One was that I wanted to make sure that my ability to help a patient scale from that individual patient to the broader global patient that represented my childhood and how I came to be who I was. So I wanted to make sure that I had that impact at a global level. And then the second thing that I wanted to also do was in the healthcare environment, you're really focused on delivery within the walls that you live in. So that really led to the calling to join AstraZeneca. And one of the great mentors of my life and one of the great influencers in my life was Jose Baselga, who was the president of R&D at AstraZeneca. And Jose reached out to me, and I still remember this. And he said, Sunil, we can read the textbooks of cancer, or we can write the chapters that'll define care for decades to come. Come and join us. Let's write the chapters together. So that was 2019, 7 years ago, and I joined AstraZeneca.
I want to understand how people are using AI, right? How executives such as you are using AI in your daily life. How healthcare companies or life sciences companies like AstraZeneca are thinking about AI, right? And there is a lot of promise, around patient care, around drug discovery, right? But wanted to get a sense of where it is, what are you seeing on the ground, what is reality?
So there's moments that all of us remember or acknowledge as to where were you when you first felt the power of an important technology or important tool. I still remember when in the early to mid 90s, the first sort of email and first access to the internet when that happened. I remember the first time I gave a targeted therapy to a patient. I remember the first time I gave an antibody drug conjugate to a patient and the remarkable response that I saw for that breast cancer patient. I remember when we saw the effect of combination treatments with chemo and radiation and what it can unlock. So there's moments, those are inflection points that give you the spark of what's possible. For AI, I have the same enthusiasm. And I'll share with you a little bit about where the enthusiasm stems from, and then a little bit about sort of where I use it. So, I spent about 20 years in clinical medicine. And in those 20 years of clinical medicine, I can attest that the technology evolution beyond medicines, beyond care technology, but the true impact of technology never really reached patients to the degree that it should have. Like it did not, right? Because I think there was, whether we take a look at electronic health records that were there, whether we were taking a look at the patient experience, a customer experience in a different environment was very different than a personal patient experience in a healthcare environment. So it never really reached there. And when I started to see what AI could do, and I started to envision a future where a patient will have access to the right information. A patient will have a much stronger voice in their decision making. A patient will have a much better experience on the medicines that they will go on. And that to me started to say, you know what? This is what the new future of healthcare is going to look like. And finally, there's a promise that technology can meet the patient where the previous technologies failed to do so.
Where do you think AI will get to? Do you think that the future is a situation where a patient interacts with AI directly? How much do you think, how quickly do you think we can get there if we ever get there? And obviously all of us, if I have any condition, if my family has any condition, first thing I do is go to ChatGPT and ask it, right? And definitely get a second opinion of AI. But where do you think that's headed?
I think the patient voice is going to be much stronger now as a result of their access to information and technology through AI than it's ever been. The current paradigm of providing treatment decision-making between an oncologist and a patient is the oncologist has the information, the patient is the recipient, and even though participating in the shared decision-making, it's really the oncologist has the right information to be able to guide and inform, but the patient is just the recipient. But you can start to then envision a future state where the patient will have come in much more prepared with the right information, but also information that is personalized to them and their values as to what's important. And that's going to be a very different conversation on the shared decision making. And I think this will give patients a really important voice in order to make sure that they're participating in that decision making. So that's one realm. The second realm is I think we have gotten much better in understanding biology, cancer biology, to help inform what's driving the cancer, to help inform what is the right therapy for a patient. What we have not done to date is understand the patient and its factors to see how a medicine will interact with that specific patient, to see what their individual experience will be, from side effects to potential toxicities. We have not done that as well. So now you can see the intersection of the biology and the information and the cancer treatment decision making with the patient experience that could be much more informed by AI to say, this is the most likely side effect that you're going to get. This is the most likely impact on your quality of life based on other patients and their experiences that we have been able to measure. So now you have the treatment-driven approach and a patient experience approach that will help inform the treatment decision making. And that promise of what that future looks like is going to be very powerful. And finally, I think will unlock the field of improving, measuring, and informing the patient experience. So not only they're getting the right drug, but they're also getting the right experience with that drug when they take it.
One of the questions is around drug recommendations, right? I mean, how is there like a large enough universe of drugs for the treatment to be personalized? I mean, or maybe, of course, dosage, and there are so many other components of that, but how personalized can it be, and how quickly can we get there?
Yeah. So if we take a look at, 10 years from now, today, and 10 years from today. So 10 years previously, let's take a look at a patient with breast cancer who's got a subtype of breast cancer, hormone receptor positive. We maybe had 3 or 4 types of treatment for that patient. Today, we may have 7 or 8 treatments. And an oncologist, I think, whether in a community setting or academic setting, has been able to keep up to date with the evidence. 10 years from now, for that same patient, there's likely going to be 25, 30 treatment options available. So when the patient is sitting in front of an oncologist, say, what is my treatment option? That's going to be much more challenging unless you have data-informed, AI-enabled, supportive clinical decision support tools in order to help the oncologist and patient make a decision. And if you don't have that, then the care of a patient who's in Chicago versus a care patient who's in Nebraska or versus a patient in Toronto can be very different because they may not have access to the same information. So the first big power I see is ability for patients and physicians to have clinical decision support tools available to them to augment their decision making, to say, based on that patient profile, based on patients like this is likely the best therapy for them. Now the patient may say, based on my values and based on the experience I want, between 2 therapies, I may still go for a treatment that may be slightly less effective for me, but has a better patient experience based on my values. But you will need that, and you will see a future where very soon that gets enabled. And I think for us, that's really critical. From a pharma company perspective, and for a clinician whose life's mission has been to help patients, is very important, because if we don't have those tools, the disparities in care and the care gaps that exist will be so wide because of the complexity that is coming through. So from a pharma and life sciences leadership, we want to make sure that we bring valued medicine, transformative medicines, but we also make sure that the patients and clinician make the right treatment decision for that individual patient, because that's where the value is going to be measured.
And how do the guidelines change? Because if the universe of options is, I mean, if there are 3 or 4 drugs, then the number of options is limited. You can create guidelines, right? But if there are 25 drugs, then the combinations and the choices become thousands, if not millions, right? At that point, how do you define guidelines? How do you think about what do you think the role of these regulating bodies or the organizations that define these guidelines? How do they have to think about AI?
I think where we are now is what I would classify as personalized medicine, because we're now looking at guidelines which connect the evidence that you spoke about. We connect the genomic information, say from the biomarkers, and we're now looking at the individual person and their actual disease. Has the disease gone to the bones or has it gone to the liver? Does the patient want hair loss or do they do not want hair loss? Has a patient have had previous history of infections or non-infections? And now, instead of just saying one therapy, one biomarker, one patient, we will have potentially multiple therapies for the same biomarker, but those therapies are going to be selected based on that person. So the person comes out to be top. And now no longer the guidelines are going to be just a paper format, but the guidelines are going to be driven by the patient and the complexity of their disease to be able to have the right AI clinical decision support tool to augment, not replace, but to augment the clinical decision making. And that to me is why AI offers an incredible pathway for us to pivot from evidence-based or guideline-based or precision therapy to personalized treatment for that individual person.
Got it. No, that makes sense. And the guidelines will evolve to sort of accept that, right? I mean, rather than sort of being an algorithm that if this, then this, if this, then this, you have to evolve to give that freedom of choice to the physician, who's then powered by AI to make those choices with respect to treatment planning for
and
the
then,
patient.
then the patient and the person who has the disease will also have an important say, because they'll have access to the same information and they can start to say, here's some values that I would like in my treatment. Because the treatment options are much more varied, they can be part of that decision making.
Got it. No, that's very interesting. And how do I mean, maybe speak about how do life sciences companies think about this kind of future where there is a certain drug that is recommended, but if there are multiple choices, how would the physician decide? And how do you think about how do life sciences companies think about that kind of a world?
Yeah, it's really important for us right now, because no longer are we in the realm of, surgery, chemo, radiation therapy, and a small molecule. The modalities that we have available to us are increasingly expanding. So the question then becomes, when we are making a prioritization decision, or we are identifying which is the right modality for us to take, it has to come from the patient to say, what will the patient of tomorrow most likely going to benefit from? What will they value the most? And how do we make sure that whatever we're prioritizing matches the needs of the patient of tomorrow? So we spend a lot of time thinking about the medicines of the future. What will be those medicines of the future? We have to be very careful in making the right prioritized decision, which is no longer just based on efficacy, but it's based on what is likely going to be the treatment that will help the patient of the future the best. So a lot of my work and my team's work is thinking about care, not only of today, but also care of tomorrow and the day after tomorrow.
Makes sense. No, thank you. That's very interesting. And this is sort of going into the AI perspective from my perspective, right? It's always the question of how much choice do you provide somebody, right? And how do you think users would, as a practitioner, how would you want to use AI in your practice?
Yeah, it's interesting if you think about what are we trying to solve for, right? What are the biggest gaps, challenges that exist at a clinician-patient interface at the health system level. And as a clinician, as a practicing clinician, just 5-10 years ago, the amount of time I spent in front of the computer screen trying to download reports, trying to get information available, trying to make sure that I was typing in progress note, versus actually spending time face-to-face with a patient, over time got worse and worse, where I was spending more time in front of a computer screen than I was looking at a patient. And I think if you ask any clinician or the next past 5 to 10 years, they're basically behind the computer screen. They're trying to get as much information. However, I think AI has an ability and technology has an ability to free up all that time so the patient can go back, or the physician can go back and focus on looking at the patient. The ability to digest all that information about, what that patient's journey has been. That's in a snap now, that we can use tools that give us a clear summary. The ability to digest radiology reports across years in a very quick manner. The ability to monitor key lesions, which we would have to track manually or track it in different ways, was time consuming. So there is a time saving aspect that AI offers so that the clinician can spend time with the patient. So that's number one. The second thing, as we've been discussing, is that there's a complexity aspect, complexity of evidence, complexity of new data, new information, new studies. And how do you distill that all down so it's specific to that patient that's sitting in front of them? You have the ability to synthesize the information using AI so it's relevant to that patient who's sitting with them. That saves time, resources, and also, I think, applied knowledge. So I think that starts to happen. And the third thing is the patient themselves. Imagine a patient of the future, as you're describing, when I used to ask a patient, how's your day? How are you doing? They'll remember what happened today. They'll remember a little bit about what happened 2 days ago. They may remember a little bit that happened a week, 2 weeks ago. But this visit sometimes are 2 months, 3 months, and we don't have a great picture. But you can imagine a future state where you have data and variables, where you have a snapshot of exactly what has transpired, what were the spikes, what were the key moments, and you have a patient journey in your hands so you can address how best do you meet the needs of the patient, not based on today, but over the last 3 months. And you'll be able to capture that in that discussion. So I think there is a promise that AI has in order to really make that patient and clinician interaction much more humane, now enabled by AI rather than what it was before.
I mean, we think about it from a radiology perspective, right? How much burden does AI put in their decision making?
And I think, as we were sharing with in the previous example for hormone receptor positive breast cancer, who has 40 options potentially in the next 10 years, 20, 30, 40 options, unless you have the ability for AI to sort of narrow that down to say, here's the 2 or 3 most relevant options for this patient.
Yeah.
Here is the ones that are most likely going to have the best benefit. And here are the ones that we and the patient also aligned with that we should need to discuss. I think it actually helps to narrow down and simplify the complexity so that you have a more focused discussion rather than having an ad hoc and complex discussion.
Makes sense. So just to summarize this, right, what you're basically thinking about is a future where we have a lot more data about the human body, number one, and longitudinal data, which can then be parsed by AI to find the right biomarkers, right? And then sort of matched with the right drug combinations to create the best set of treatment plans for physicians to then sort of go through and basically give personalized medicine to each patient as they come in.
Very, very well summarized, along with the patient who also has relevant information and relevant data so that they can have a much more educated and informed discussion than even more so than today. I'll give you an example of my own personal journey on this. So last year, I suffered a back injury. And so it was an acute back injury. I was in the gym, lifting weights that I should not have been lifting, and pretending to be much younger than I am, and clearly led to this back injury. And so I immediately went and met with a physio, and I met with a spine specialist, and there were some recommendations that were made. And I said, okay, these are good, but I have AI power in my head. So I created an agent who served as a nutritionist, a physiotherapist, a chiropractor, a kinesiologist, an exercise trainer, a spine surgeon on my fingertips. And every morning, there was an exercise routine, there was a nutrition routine, there was data that I was feeding back, and I had my own concierge medical team using my AI tool that helped me monitor, helped me track my day-to-day routine, and I recovered. And from a clinical decision making to tracking my progress to informing me on the latest evidence, this tool was incredibly useful. It did not replace the incredible physiotherapist that I saw and the spine specialist that I had, but I came in a much more informed manner, and they appreciated the information that I provided using the charts that I was able to track my progress. And to me, that is going to be the future care model, where you have a much more engaged patient, you have a much more informed patient, and you have a care team that is on your fingertips that's helping guide you through a daily basis.
I also do the same, and I get very good answers from all the AI tools. And before, like I said, before I consult a physician for any of my family members, I already do some research. And one of the things that you realize about AI is the answer is only as good as the prompt, right? And to prompt well, you have to understand that domain really well. And if you tell it that, okay, I have headache and fever, I mean, it's a very generic answer, right? But then to be able to say that, okay, I mean, I had this particular disease and with this mutation and this cancer, and then you, I mean, if you provide all that information, you get very good data back. But the question is, are most patients able to do that?
Yeah, I think what today's world, we're looking at it from the technology and the data and the structure and the framework of the AI tools of today. You can envision in the next 2, 3, 4 years where the AI tools become much better as partnered diagnostics, and then just being dependent on the prompt that's been issued. You know, when I was trained in medical school, I was trained how to interview a patient. We met many standardized patients, and I was told what questions to ask. What is the format? When somebody says, I have a headache, you ask them, how severe is the headache? Where is the pain located? Does it happen in the morning or does it happen in the evening? Does it happen where it's progressively getting worse, or is it there's a variable? So there is ways of us as medical students, as medical trainees, we were trained to explore and inform and learn from that. And I learned from interviewing and engaging with hundreds of patients through my career. You can start to then envision that the AI tools of the future are going to start to create this learning feedback mechanism. They're going to start to sort of learn from patients. They're going to start learn from the system. They're going to start learning from the errors. I think the worst thing that we can do is to say that the current AI models are perfect or are definitive or are replace the health system. That's wrong. Yeah. What we should be open to, I think, saying is that we are on a learning journey with the current AI tools. And we envision that as we all learn through our domains of expertise, these tools are also going to start learning.
Got it. No, that makes sense. And I think one of the sort of maybe prerequisites to get to that level is also for the patient to have access to their own medical record data, right?
Yeah.
And that sort of then gets fed into the AI. So there is a lot more that the AI can do with it.
And there's, as you mentioned, Prashant, there's a lot of sort of health literacy that we need to build in as well, right? And the system is responding to sickness, is responding to patient's illness. But you can start to envision that a future system is where when you're tracking things, when you're informing things, it can start to tell a person to say, I've noticed that there's been a variability in your heart rate. So have you noticed something? So he starts to anticipate things before they get worse. And I think then you start to think about us moving from a sick care system to really a more of a caring, monitoring, tracking system.
Got it. No, makes a lot of sense. Now, maybe moving on to one more aspect of AI, especially for life sciences companies around drug discovery. What is the promise there, and what is already happening, and what do you think is the future?
I think the impact of AI in life sciences is going to be tremendous. So we certainly have an amazing opportunity to shorten the life cycles of R&D by deploying AI tools, both from target discovery, but also from our prioritization, and also doing some of those experiments much faster than we have traditionally done to shorten that life cycle from target identification to first in human by months, if not years. So I think that aspect is absolutely here, and I think it's being deployed very well. What I sometimes am puzzled by is for people to think that that will in itself be sufficient. That just starts the journey. Then comes, of course, understanding the phase 1 clinical trial data, understanding which patients to give the medicine to, understanding which sites to do the data, what are we learning from each patient, then making the right decisions to go into phase 2, phase 3 clinical studies, making sure that they're designed really well, making sure that they represent the patient care of the future. And I have not seen AI deployed end-to-end in a seamless manner that connects all of those different pieces. I've seen chunks of AI for clinical trial matching, AI for site selection, AI for drug discovery, but it has not been connected. So I think the true impact that we're going to have is not going to be just in the first mile of target drug discovery, but it's really start to see about how are we connecting that system end to end so that we shorten the time to first in human, but we also then use the information early on the ongoing clinical trials to help inform what should be the right registrational studies in the right settings. And that connectivity needs to happen, and that has not happened yet.
I mean, how do you like this? I think about this for Cure all the time, that how do you get more people to use AI, right? How do you help them use AI in a better way and do their tasks in a better way through AI, right? How does the organization think about that? Are people encouraged to use AI in their daily sort of decision making? And how do they enable you to sort of enable each employee to maximize value of AI?
So there's three things that we do that I think are very, very, very helpful. So last year, we first built AI literacy. So we launched a big campaign for our 90,000 employees for gold, silver, platinum certification. And we wanted to make sure that everyone had a baseline AI knowledge. And I think the team did a fantastic job doing that. The second thing that we did was we brought AI to the individual role to say, as a marketer, as a commercial head, as an R&D head, what are the tools that you will benefit from most specific to your role? And what we did is we didn't give them access to just the tools, but we give them access to a platform where they can ask the question, what is the best tool that I should use if I'm doing protocol writing? What is the best tool I should use when I'm creating a brand campaign? So then it becomes where the tools are serving the needs of them and their role, and we're bringing the suite of tools that is specific to them. And that was a really important effort to make sure that that's at their desktop as the first prompt, and that we are helping them tailor to their specific needs. And I think we have seen great value of doing that, and we've seen great use of that. Then we created a peer AI buddy system. We have people with different acceptance and different values that they put on how they use AI. So we started to identify people who have done it really well and start to buddy them with people who are interested but don't have the same skill level or the readiness is there. And that buddy system has worked really well to give them an opportunity to learn from those who are doing it specific to their roles. So those three things have started to create the literacy, the fluency, the applicability, and the comfort for people to start to adopt it. And it was an aha moment for me early this year is when I started to launch this within our global oncology teams, was when I recognize is that it's not the tool, but it's the task. And we need to start with the task and then bring the tool and not talk about the tool on its own. So when we start to marry them, that's when the adoption happened.
You mentioned Jose Bazelga, he's a mentor, and I mean, sort of wanted to understand, I mean, he told you once that together we would write the chapters of healthcare, not just read the textbooks, right? So looking at how healthcare is evolving today, particularly with the rise of AI, would you think he would have seen that coming? And what would have surprised him also?
So Jose, of course, has had an impact on many of our lives, and I think about him a lot. The principles that define Jose was that he was data-driven. Anything that you ask him, he would say, Sunil, I really care about what you have to say, but I don't really care about your opinions. I care about the data that inform those opinions. So you had to come in and bring data and not just opinions. So I think that principle, he had to work with urgency because in his words, patients don't have time and we need to do what we can to bring medicines to them as quickly, as fast as possible. So he had sort of that urgency. He also had an ability to see what others were capable of before they recognized what they were capable of. And he had this vision, not only what clinical care was going to look like, but also what others were able to do. So as I reflect upon that, and I reflect upon the power of AI, I think about the importance of data that informs the AI tools. I think about the importance of time, of where and how we have to deploy things so they're faster, they're quicker, they're smarter. And I think about how all of us have gaps in our domains and where and how do we acknowledge that some of those gaps can be addressed by having the right access to technology so that we are even more complete in the work that we do. So I think Jose would have been incredibly amazed and astounded, but he would have also said, I told you so early on, because he recognized the value of those things that drive, I think, the future of what technology has to offer.
And when we look back on this decade, what would we think of this decade? Would we think of this decade as sort of the most important decade in human history, you think?
Wow, Prashant, important one. I think the next 3 years will define the incredible opportunity that AI has to unleash. Absolutely, I think the advent, the democratization of AI, the ability for this to be deployed and across different domains and different industries, the access that is provided, absolutely has been game changer, and I think will be recognized as one of the biggest revolutions that has happened. The question on what it's able to do that is better and then partnered with humans remains to be seen over the next 3 to 4 years. And how we maintain those guardrails where the benefits far outweigh the risks also remains to be seen. I am forever the optimist to think that we will unlock the benefits for humanity by working very closely with AI has to offer in our day-to-day lives. But I also am a realist to say that there is going to be a moment over the next few years where we will have to make some very difficult decisions when the power exceeds its intent. And I think we will need to be very watchful and careful now moving forward to make sure that that power is for the use of good and does not convey any ill intent. And that struggle, that tension is going to emerge in the next 3 to 5 years. I can envision that. But we hope that we can maximize the benefit of it before we have to spend too much energy in that tension.
People talk about AI being similar to nuclear technology, right? Which had its pros and cons, right? Bigger cons, of course. And nuclear technology fortunately was regulated very well, right? There was international alliances formed to make sure that we are not proliferating nuclear technologies and using it safely. What do you think? How do you think AI will get there, especially in healthcare, right? Where finally, in a lot of other areas, it might, if your email has a wrong word or something wrong, maybe it will have some impact, right? But if you actually change the treatment for a patient or have the wrong diagnosis, it has a big impact.
I think professional bodies have to have a very strong say. The challenge is that we do see fragmentation that is occurring right now across the geopolitical landscape, where it's hard to regulate things. It's hard to control things. And given the technology access, it's going to be hard to regulate it uniformly. But I think there are certainly principles that all of us, including first and foremost the AI organizations, need to adhere to make sure that they have consistent policies. This is a competitive environment, and I think there's likely going to be 3 or 4 leaders that will emerge over the next couple of years that will be the defining leaders. And we need to encourage them to make sure that they have shared values and principles, and to make sure that it's being done for good. But when it starts to get into now, when some of these companies will be listed soon and you have to respond to the shareholders, that's when the pressure points come in. And so it'll be interesting to see how they react. I think the broader community will have a much stronger say to adopt the products that meet those values and adhere to those principles.
Well, thank you so much. I think I'm also an optimist, and hopefully this leads us to a much better future for humanity, and AI will make a lot of our lives better, and definitely lives of kids who are much younger right now. Hopefully they live much longer. And hundreds of years, hopefully. But thank you so much for your time, Sunil. I think your perspectives on AI in healthcare, oncology, very, very exciting conversation. I really loved it. And thanks for joining us today.
Prashant, it's great to be here. And again, I think thank you for organizing this conversation with different leaders in the field. We are all students of what this technology has to offer. I don't think anyone has solved it, but I think this journey is exciting. It's energizing, and I hope that we continue to have this kind of dialogue so that we can learn from each other.
Thank you. Thank you, Sunil.
Thank you, Prashant.